During the Second World War, hidden along the shores of Lake Ontario, a top-secret training facility helped shape some of the most daring intelligence operations of the war. Known as Camp X, it was Canada's answer to the world of espionage, sabotage, covert communication, and special operations. Agents were trained there in everything from code breaking and intelligence gathering to survival behind enemy lines. Decades later, Camp X remains one of the most fascinating and mysterious chapters in Canadian history. Today, we're joined by Rob Cressman, historian and expert on Camp X, to separate the fact from the fiction, explore the camp's lasting legacy, and uncover the stories of the men and women who trained in secrecy to help win a global war. All right. Well, Robbie, thanks so much for joining us. This is so cool for me. As mentioned, I kind of teed you up in the intro there, but as I take a look at, and thank you very much for these, here's just a sample of the books I think that we're going to get out of the Cressman camp. This first one, by the way, very cool, Tracking the Little Giant Killer. This is really a story that we're going to be talking about today in many ways. We're going to hear this name, Bill Underwood, and his legacy of combat training. Your updated version inspired by that, Discreet Fighting. I'll recommend that you reach out, and I'll put the link in the description for these. And what we're going to be talking about today, of course, is Camp X. A little bit about you, first of all. Robbie, how do you end up the guy who knows all about this? I mean, I know what you do for a living, but are you even allowed to share that?
Yes, it's some of what I do has been published, and so I can to some degree. But definitely, Mike, what's really come about is it's been an unintended path to discovery for me. I started off, in short, as a silly civilian, which I still am, but I've been a supporter to the special and black ops communities within our allied and countries 5, 7, and 9 Eyes and beyond. But essentially, as a civilian, had a love for martial arts. But I was always a patriotic guy, and even back in the 80s and 90s, it kind of bothered me with respect. Like, why do I have to go to China, Japan, Korea to learn how to fight? I knew our Canadian military history was exemplary. So a question came to me, essentially, well, did our Canadian boys ever, I want to learn some Canadian. Did our Canadian guys ever create a Canadian fighting system? I want to at least learn something Western. And so I started to do the research, found nothing, until I came across the legacy of Bill Underwood, when everything essentially opened up. And in short, I discovered that Canada not only has a martial art, if you will, although it's birthed in the military special operations perspective, it's not civilian, okay, or wasn't birthed civilian, but essentially we have a grandfather of fighting, and it was so effective, man, that it was actually classified after World War II. That's why a lot of stuff was locked down. Now, he was involved publicly after World War II, but his real accomplishments were actually deemed to be illegal to teach outside declared war because it was that vicious and violent. So I ended up reviving Bill Underwood's legacy, okay, and his original Combato systems, which were taught during the war. Bill Underwood, British-born Bill Underwood, emigrated to Canada, created the first fighting system for our Canadian military called Combato. And then after the war, he started to get asked by law enforcement and government, like, hey, Bill, you were teaching our soldiers, how to use their hands and, and so forth. Can you teach our police officers Combato?
Oh, wow.
And Bill's like, no, I can't do that. Combato's designed to kill everything that moves. Well, Bill, can you modify it? Can you modify a fighting system to be a little more defensive and subject control oriented? And he developed a Defendo system, which essentially became the template for policing defensive tactics, not only in Canada, but many places in the States. So I ended up basically being the individual that revived Bill Underwood's legacy. And there was not a single reference to him on the World Wide Web in the 90s. Everything that's there today is because of the research I was doing. And that essentially opened doors as I started to research the fact that, Underwood, these vets would talk about the fact that Underwood was a secret instructor at this super top classified training facility called Camp X. Like, James Bond was born. I'm like, what? Bond was born out of this camp in Canada? And I ended up connecting with the world expert on Camp X, who verified that, yes, we believe Underwood was involved. And I then spent a connected 20 years in the Camp X legacy. And when the classified community, let's just say it's sometimes a horrible blanket term, but the sensitive communities, as I was doing research, found out that I had a lot of the original stuff, let's say, from the tradecraft from the Camp X era, I started to get asked, listen, would you show our intelligence agents today what we were doing at Camp X? Will you show our soldiers, right?
So they wanted you to go back to this legacy.
Yeah, it was so mysterious for them. That's
Bill
correct.
Underwood.
The whole Bill Underwood and Camp X legacy was so mysterious. And so our modern agencies, really didn't have any idea they knew what was there, but didn't know what was going on, even up to the levels of our Joint Task Force 2 or JTF 2, our SEAL Team 6. They knew about Camp X, but didn't really know what was going on there. And there's reasons. I was hinting at it in an earlier discussion. There's reasons. We know why. Now, I very much believe why, and I've released this in this book. But we know why now they've kept that legacy suppressed. But I was originally asked, starting back in the early 2000s, to say, listen, we'd love to see some of this, what was going on. And so times change, though. And in essence, as they asked me to problem solve and giving them ways to fight with their hands, okay, that were really more applicable to special operations and not the ring for MMA.
So in other words,
sports.
Right. This is a scenario where you're up close. There's been a change. Personal. There's been a change of temperature with your
So show us
contact.
what they were doing then.
Yeah.
You can't really fit the old model over today's environment. So they said, listen, Robbie, can you develop something? And that was for me, which was birthed in the early 2000s, was I went about trying to develop a method that really taking the mindset and the point and purpose of what was going on at Camp X and how to develop an application for it in a modern environment. And in essence, I can wrap it up with one thing. The difference between your standard martial arts sports, mixed martial arts kind of platform than what our guys and girls need today at a special ops level or a black ops level is this. The World War II context was essentially they had to take a civilian. It was a civilian. Okay, let's say, for example, to train them as a spy. Maybe they needed a forensic accountant to be dropped into an automotive factory in France. Sneak him in there and he'll report back on what the Nazis were doing with this factory now. Okay. Well, how do you take an accountant who, a horrible overstatement or rather blanket statement, but who's got a tape between his glasses and a calculator in his pocket all his life. He's never fought. How do you take an accountant, Mike, teach him how to be able to defend himself and win a bar fight? And by the way, you got hours to do it. Welcome to Camp X. And so I took that mindset of short duration, high retention training, developed a whole new method based on much more modern physiology. And for 20 years, I've been out running around our allied special ops communities within Tier 1 special forces, within government intelligence agencies, and policing special operations units, and teaching this new method. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's go back to the original method and Bill Underwood's Underwood, did I say that right?
Bill Underwood, yeah.
Bill Underwood.
Yeah.
Let's go back to his original training and teachings, which fascinated you so much in the first place. Combato?
Combato. That's correct.
Combato.
Yeah.
So tell me about this. What made this unique at a time in World War II where spies needed to be trained? Was it the ability to train them fast? Was it how was this born to be his thing?
Well, in essence, Underwood's story is absolutely a fascinating one. A childhood friend of Harry Houdini, Buffalo Bill Coley, Charlie Chaplin. Again, that's why I wrote a book on it. It's insane. Yeah. The history is absolutely incredible. But in essence, Underwood was a part of a day, and he was a leading, let's say on the leading edge of it in many ways. He was really the first grandfather in North America. He really gave the Americans much of their start at the beginning of unarmed fighting at the beginning of the war. But it was an era when the East was truly meeting the West for the first time. So you had these judokas, jiu-jitsu, masters that were coming for the first time to British shores or European shores, and they were kind of clashing. And really, in a very, I guess, really, it's a very practical story in a way. They really needed to, come up with an ability to give guys, and it was really more the boys back then, and then the ladies in a lot of ways, but give them a short duration, high retention skill set. You can't train sports and even MMA type skills. You can't learn that in a short time. You can't learn how to punch and kick in a short period of time.
You would assume, yeah.
Yeah, you can't. And I can tell you that. That's what I do for a living and for a long time, and internationally at that. But that being said, essentially what Underwood and some of the guys of his time were developing was a much more linear, direct, and aggressive approach to jiu-jitsu and judo. So it was more biomechanical in nature still, by way of biomechanics, but it was more direct, it was linear and to the point, okay? And so it could be learned, and that's why sometimes it was called dirty judo. Okay, it came down to that. But Underwood really made it Western, and whereas in the East, they would turn it into much more of a philosophy and a way of life, what we called warrior culture, boys back in Underwood's day would just call it a trick. Hey, let me show you a trick. If somebody grabs you here, let me show you how to contend with that. And that's a trick to deal with that. So it kept it simple and linear. But what Underwood did was he even went further and was still trying to figure out how he did it and what he did. But he developed a system of unarmed fighting. And this is not, I know what I'm talking about. And I've been tested under very high